Good everyone. I hope you guys are having an amazing day. So today I will be talking a bit about the org based deployment. Now, as a part of a platform developer certification, this is something Salesforce have added new because in the past, right, you just only need to know change set, which I've talked about it in my course anyways. So what I'm doing is just to add an extra stuff which Salesforce have added. Now, this is a part of my commitment to make sure that even though I release a free course, I just keep it up to date, right? So over the course of time, right, Salesforce been investing heavily on their development experience tools, which is very important in my perspective because, going with those days where you could do everything using chain set, right? So if you're running a small shop, right? Small shop in the sense if you're running a small consultancy firm or a small Salesforce development firm, you can pretty much get by using Chainsaw, right? Because if you are a single developer or admin who are looking after an org, you can pretty much, schedule your release cycle, based on your end user, right? Now, as your team size grows, let's say, for instance, if you moved from, say, one developer to, say, 15 developers, and your customization has become more complex over the course of time. Let's say you're doing a Sales Cloud customization, and another team is doing, say, a Service Cloud customization. Another team is working on Einstein, right? So doing that deployment, right, using and chain set is will gonna be a very tedious and it's not very efficient, right? So keeping that into consideration, there is something called org-based deployment, right? So when you're talking about an org-based deployment, I know that it might freaks out some functional consultants thinking, oh, I do not know anything about the VS Code. I do not know anything about the DX extension. That's all fine. You don't have to worry about it. I'm just gonna show you in a simple way. I mean, from your exam point of view, you don't really have to know too much about the code or Salesforce commands. It's not really needed. But since you are an app builder certified, I do expect that you have some understanding about what is a chain set, what is an org-based deployment, or what is a package-based deployment, so that you can make an informed decision when you're working with your customer, right? So that's the main aim for Salesforce. That's the main aim for you guys to know it, right? Okay. Now, like I said, chain set deployment works for small firms, but if you're planning to extend, um, org set is something you can look at it. So, I'm just going to teach you from Trailhead. It's pretty simple, right? I don't want to use the slide. It's just a waste of the time to copy paste from one place to another place. Everything is well documented here. But I'm just gonna share my personal experience based on a real life scenario. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So the place where I work, right? I work as an architect in a government agency. It's a pretty big government agencies in New Zealand. One of the biggest. We deal with a lot of things. So we do org-based deployment. We don't do chain set, right? Chain set. I have done chain set for one of the customer, a insurance company. So they use Chainset. They don't use any CI/CD. I mean, back in the days they didn't use, but now I'm not sure. I no longer do any service for them. Um, so we use the Chainset deployment, and which is very efficient. So to do the Chainset deployment, we do org-based deployment. My apologies. So to do org-based deployment, you need to know what a version control is about. So the version control is the place where you normally store your source code, right? So you can have Azure, right? Azure has a pretty good Azure repo, or you can use GitHub, which is pretty popular as well. You can also use Bitbucket. That's another one. You can also use AWS, which is not very popular, but it's very powerful, right? I mean, but New Zealand Azure is most popular along with Bitbucket. That being said, I'm gonna just give you a rundown using Azure DevOps, right? DevOps in Salesforce plays a very important role. So this is where an org-based deployment comes to the picture, right? As an app builder, you don't really have to know in detail, but just an overview, just to have an idea, right? Okay, so the first thing first, we need to have a source control system, right? Why do we need to have a source control system? For different reasons, okay? So you do a change in your org, okay, and you take that change to your Visual Studio Code, which is pretty simple, and then you push the change to your source control. Now, that goes back to my first question: why do we need a source control? So imagine you are, let's say, I give an example, right, where my company moved from a one developer to 15 developers, right? Now imagine, right, three developers, they want to make a change on a page layout, account page layout, okay? Now, one developer did a change, and let's say we are not doing any source control, just for the sake of argument. And another developer accidentally override the change of a previous developer. Now, how do you know what change the previous developer has done if you don't have any source control in place? Do you get my point? So the source control have history tracking where you can go back and see, okay, these changes has been done by somebody else. So let me give you a very simple rundown. Now I have this Azure. So if you haven't seen Azure, so it's just pretty simple. So, I just go to Azure DevOps. This is my, I've created this is my dummy project, right? This is not my real source control. I use a separate Azure repo for my own personal projects, but this is just for demonstration, right? So you can create a new project, right? You can create a new project. You can write a name if you wanted to make public, but it will be very silly to do so. Just do private, and you can do Git, or if you want to use a Team Foundation, right? So it's very popular not only among the Salesforce developer, but among C# developer, Java developer, Delphi, where it is, right? Name it. So I have an existing project in place, right? So I have a CI/CD project, and this is how the Salesforce repo looks like when you get it from an org. You have the Force app, right? And which contains all of your, stuff. But right now I don't have much, so I'm only pushed LWC and Aura. Um, or let me show you another one which might have full. Maybe this might have. Okay, right. So this one's have a bit more, right? So this is where all of your stuff goes into like objects, right? Custom objects, the triggers and classes, right? As you can see, I have classes here. And let's say I wanted to see an history of change, okay? So you can go here, the history tab. You can see I'm the first person who committed it. Um, and as you can see that there's a history of other people change. So you can even compare it to see, what all change that's been done. It's pretty handy, right? So, having a source control, helps a lot in doing an efficient development, right? You might be a functional consultant who have done changes to your flows, right? And another person accidentally overwritten your flows. So if you have a source control in place, you can go back and you can blame it to see who has done what, and you can compare using in the history. It's pretty efficient, right? I mean, I can't really, if you haven't really used it, right? I will really encourage you to start using it, start practicing it, right? You will understand, when you start using it. Or if you're not comfortable with Azure, you can use GitHub, right? If that's what you've used before, it's fine. It's pretty much the same. Because there are a lot of things. If you are proceeding for, say, development lifecycle, you will, architect certification. Whenever you go for it, you will learn, about the branching strategy, why version control is important for that. This comes very important because these are a part of a DevOps operation on Salesforce side, and yet, it's the least uh, topic, and yet more powerful at the same time. So this is why the source control. I hope you understand. This is pretty simple. Now we have a concept called the Scratch org. Okay, Scratch org is like a temporary org. Every developer can create their own Scratch org, which is normally recommended. But again, it's based on a company policy. Some companies do not use Scratch org, but the Salesforce says, hey, go and use the Scratch org, which is pretty cool. So for org-based deployment, usually you need Scratch org, right? So that's highly recommended. So the developer A create their own Scratch org, developer B create their own Scratch org, they do the change and push the change to here, okay? And once the changes get pushed, you will have a CI/CD pipeline, and the pipeline will push your changes to to different sandboxes, right? And from there it goes to the production environment. So that's all a part of a DevOps operation. So the org-based deployment, where you actually takes the copy of an org, do the change, and it actually pushes the changes, to your production. So, and it's very powerful at the same time, right? Because you have to, like the change set deployment, right? You need to plan for it efficiently, right? You can't, I mean, normally it's often recommended that you inform your stakeholders before you're going to move the stuff to your production, because you might break some changes. You might have to align with your testers or regression testing team to to test the changes once the code get pushed into the say sandbox of production. And so that has to be planned, and you might have an environment team who deals with say Azure IDs and login kind of stuff from an Azure, like single sign-on kind of thing. So you have to plan that efficiently before you do any of the such thing. So let's say what we're gonna do. I'm gonna show you something. Okay, say I wanted to take this code to my Scratch or to my VS Code. So how do you do that? So it's pretty simple, right? So you have a clone option here. So you just do clone in Visual Studio Code and open. I'm using Ubuntu. You can use whatever you want, right? So I will open my Visual Studio Code. It's a bit slow at times, so it does whatever it's supposed to do. It takes some time in Ubuntu because lately because I've done some patch update on Ubuntu version 20. That's what I use, 20.4. So I might upgrade to the latest one eventually, but so it does a bit of slow. So hang on a second. Do you want to save changes? No, I don't want. Okay, let me try it again. Yeah, clone. Okay, so now it's asking for the project. So I just put it project for now. You have to specify the name of the. So when you try to clone it, right, it'll ask you, hey, where do you want me to store this files that you want me to get it to your desktop? So, just put wherever you want. And so I just put it project. So see, it's cloning it, and so it's just gonna take a little bit. So this is how you clone it. Once you clone it and you create a Scratch org here, and then push the changes to your Scratch org, you will get. Oh yeah, the password. Okay, so which is yeah, I will do that here. This doesn't matter anyways. Okay, so I'll copy it. I mean, usually, would you like to open the clone resist? Open in the new window, right? So I'll open in the new window. So, and let's see if I have all the code here. So I'll go here, and you see, it cloned pretty much everything. So I got all the source code from an org. So just activating the extension. Um, so as you can see here, so that talks about, like I said, develop and test, build, release, and you every developer has their own Scratch org, as I explained to you guys. So that depends upon the company policy, right? And one more thing I just wanted to mention, like some companies will tell you, hey, you can't create Scratch org for 30 days because you might be doing something in the Scrum, right? 2 week scrum. So I say scratch up for 14 days or 15 days, whatever, right? So some companies say, hey, we are comfortable you doing for 29 days. So that's up to the company. I can't tell you, what's the best way to go forward. And some companies will say, we don't want to do the scratch up, we just do the sandbox, right? Take a code from a sandbox and we use a version control and we forget about the scratch up. So some companies do that as well. I'm not saying it's a good or bad practice, but at the same time, the place where I work, I can tell you, creating a scratch org is a pain. It's just because we use single org strategy, and different vendors comes in and they push their change, and especially the profile push. Oh my goodness. I mean, if you have done that and if you've experienced it, you know what I mean, right? So, so yeah, it has its own pros and cons. So this is how the Salesforce DX project looks like, as I explained to you, right? This is how I explained to you in the org, and and then deployment, so you can do the zip file and CLI. CLI, right? So if CLI is just a you know, it's just an extension which you install. Okay, so you go to extension here, and you could just look for Salesforce CLI, right? Let me see. So see the not Azure CLI. Azure CLI is a different thing. Salesforce CLI. So Salesforce extension pack is the one. I've done a video on that. You know how to do that. So if you're interested, go and check that out. You know how to configure the VS Code for your development. So check it out. It's still relevant, right? So I've done that with Windows, so it's pretty much the same for Linux. If you're because I'm a big Ubuntu fan. You know, I'm not a fan of Windows because I consider Windows as a primitive technology. I mean, it might offend many, but I honestly don't care. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I never liked Windows, right? Because I do not have control on my own operating system. I mean, if I wanted to tweak a kernel in Ubuntu, I can do that, but in Windows, oh hell no, because it's then you break the license, right? And so I don't like it because I don't have control on my own software, right? It's the same like Salesforce. I don't have control on Salesforce. I just a user of a Salesforce. That's how I look at it, right? I can code on it, but at the end of the day, they control how the code get compiled behind the scene, right? So, I love to be in control on certain things, right? Especially on the computer side of things, especially at least on the operating side of things, how to manage it, how to do this stuff. And I don't get that control in Windows. I can't say for Mac. I haven't used Mac. It's like it's a toy for people who love to spend a lot of money. That's how I look at it. I mean, I've used iPhone. Uh, iPhone is great. I mean, I've used iPhone because I wanted to build an app, um, so I needed to test it. So that's the reason why I used the iPhone. But apart from that, you know, I'm pretty simple in terms of configuration. I'm a big Linux user, right? I love Linux operating system. I can do a lot of stuff with it. So I'm very passionate about, especially about this technology. So, all right, sorry I digress, right? My apologies for that. Now let's have a look. Okay, so now I got the code here, right? Now you see this is what he say. We are in the master branch. So here, uh, right? I got a code from a master. See, I don't have any other repo. So just for the sake of argument, let's say I've done this change. Okay, so I've done this change here. So I will say it's a schema. Okay, whatever, right? I just saved it, and when you save it, right? So you go to this option here, and you see that this is waiting to be checked in. Okay, so you got to stage it first. Okay, and then you say um, abstract chargeable. Okay, so I will do yeah sync change. Okay, I will have to put the password again. Um, okay, all right. Now let's go back to the DevOps here. Okay, and now go to Force Hub. You know, something changed. Classes, structure, and I think this is the one updated just now. Okay, so you look at the history. See, just now. Okay, now see, and let's compare. So this is what I've added. Right. So this is the advantage of using the version control because now I can see who did the last change or what changes they have done. So you can push the change here, and you can create a. So usually what happens is right. You don't normally push the change directly to the master. That's a very bad practice. You need to have a separate branch. Could be a feature branch or could be a user branch. From the user branch, you push the change here, and then you create a pull request. Okay. So you can see that if you go here, there's something called a create a pull request. So for instance, if you're the pull request is like the pull request actually means that you try to merge your changes from your branch to a specific branch. Okay, so that's what the pull request means. And pull request, you can add an approver, where some, let's say, for your tech lead or an architect will have a go, or a senior developer for that matter, right? Can have a look at your code to see, oh, okay, you guys have done a better job, or if that person thinks, okay, this code is incorrect, can reject it. So it's like an extra pair of review. It's like a code review, right? On a using version control. It's pretty powerful. So that you might have accidentally included extra change. The other person might spot it. Hey, that change is not needed. Can you do this way, right? So this is the advantage of having a version control. And once you do pull request, it gets hits the whatever respective branch, and then if you have a CI/CD configured, so that get kicks in and then pushes the change. So this is in nutshell how the org deployment works, right? I hope you understood it. It's not difficult, right? As you can see, it's pretty simple. Some I do understand that if you are not a programmer, if you haven't programmed before, if you're someone who comes from a functional background or a business analyst side of things, right, you might find it a bit overwhelming. But trust me, it's pretty simple. Once you get a hang of it, right, you will find it sweet. This is the only option you're going to use it. You know, I can tell you that it's pretty amazing. So that's pretty much you wanted to know. You should know from an exam point of view. But if you like to learn different commands, right, you can also use, to command to retrieve the code. That's something I will encourage you to check it out. You can go to the help documentation to look for Salesforce CLI commands and practice it by yourself, right? This is pretty, I mean, normally you won't get asked in the certification, but for your own knowledge, I would highly encourage it, okay? So that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. So you guys have an amazing Monday. Take care. Adios.